I expect Cam Coleman to lead the Auburn Tigers in receiving, but it could be pretty close.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Joining us as he does every single Friday here on the show, we are dapping it up with the Darrell Dapprich, Montgomery radio legend. Darrell, I don't think it's a crazy take, but I believe Cam Coleman will lead Auburn in receiving this upcoming season. Several months ago, we put out a list of the top 5 receivers, our projection of the top 5 receivers in 2024. A lot has changed since then. That list was Coleman at 1, Rivaldo Fairweather 2. I don't think anybody will really argue with that. They may disagree, but I don't think they're going to think that that's crazy. But now after, I had Caleb Burton at 3, Jarquez Hunter at 4, and then Jay Fair, who's no longer on the team. I had him at 5. A lot has changed. Auburn has added a bunch of guys. Other guys have stepped up. But you're with me at 1, right? Cam Coleman will lead the way when it's all said and done amongst Auburn's wide receivers.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's very with hesitancy that I do that because I very rarely would expect a freshman to come in and automatically lead. So it's hard for me to just put that out there, but I can't help it. I mean, it's just he is what he is, and you can't deny it. And so, yeah, even though I'm a little bit reluctant to put a true freshman and all that hype and pressure and say he's going to lead the team in receiving, that's what he appears to be. That's who he is. So, yes, I agree. I think Cam Coleman will lead the Auburn Tigers in receiving as a true freshman.
After that's where it gets a little interesting because I think most people will say that. My number 2, and it's based solely because he wasn't on my top 5. He was on the roster when we made this list, but he didn't make my top 5 several months ago. But a strong spring, a strong A-Day, and I actually think he's probably going to lead Auburn in receptions when it's all said and done. But I'm going with Robert Lewis. The transfer didn't make my top 5. In hindsight, I definitely think he should several months ago, but I've got him as Auburn's number 2 receiver when it comes to production, when it comes to receiving yards in 2024.
Love that, and I love him. I've been raving about him since he stepped on campus, and the reason why I slot him in a little lower, I'll give some reasons on that. It's not necessarily what I don't think he's capable of or an indictment on Robert Lewis because I think he can be special in this offense, and even because he's in the slot, probably where he's projected to play. It's just the nature of who I think will be above him. So I think that Robert Lewis, in the catches that he has, is going to be very, very productive. I have KLS, Keandre Lambert-Smith, at 2nd. It's the only reason why I don't have Robert Lewis a little bit higher is because since we taped that one, a few months ago, KLS has come on campus. So all I've done and all we've heard is he's a number 2 receiver. I've done some research. I've talked to some people, Corey Geiger. I'll mention you've talked to the Locked On Nittany Lions host.
Yeah,
everybody seems to be in agreement. But if you say he's a number 2, or we say he's a number 2, and I've been emphatic about that, then I feel like he'll have number 2 type numbers. Now, receiving yards doesn't necessarily equate to a receiver when you're talking about total receiving yards. It could be a tight end, spoiler alert, a running back. But I think in this scenario, I think he's going to do enough and be special enough as a number 2 guy to slot in there and be 2nd on the team in receiving.
So what is it about him versus Robert Lewis? Because I know you're higher on Robert Lewis,
Big time.
I thought, than me. But based on this list, maybe I'm higher on him from a production standpoint. But to me, I think there's going to be more competition over the course of the season at that outside wide receiver spot because Perry Thompson is going to come on at some point. Is it day 1 as soon as he steps foot on campus, or does it take 5 or 6 weeks into the season for Perry Thompson to get more comfortable and then they're going to want to get him involved? I think there's a higher chance for Lewis to get more targets over the course of the season. And obviously that's going to turn into more production if that's the case.
It's a great point. Great counterpoint. That's why it's fun discussing this. I think that I look at past production, historical trends, and Lambert Smith is a kid that at the Power 5 level, and I'm not knocking Robert Lewis. Again, I love Robert Lewis.
Sure.
At the biggest big boy level of football in the Big Ten, he had almost 800 yards. And it's hard to equate that as to not being able to be productive in the SEC with another year under his belt. Now, is it offense? Is it quarterback? I will say this. The reason why I think that happens is because I think to get him on campus, he had to have been promised or at least encouraged about the number of targets that were going to come his way. You don't get a KLS and say, you're going to be our number 3 or 4 option. Just my opinion. I think from a target standpoint, he's been sold that he is going to get a lot of balls thrown his way. And because of that, and because of past production, even if he catches, let's say he matches production of last year and has close to 800 yards, I think that slots him into the number 2 spot pretty solidly, and maybe even close to number 1 with what we've seen from the receiving core in the past, right?
But that's a pretty big statement to make. If you told me right now that KLS will match his production from a year ago and have 800 yards and be Auburn's number 2 option in the passing game, Auburn goes 9-3 this upcoming season.
Well, that goes back to you feeling comfortable and us talking about could Auburn get to a 3,000-yard passer. And I think if that happens, see, there's so many little dominoes that'll have to fall. If you've got Cam Coleman with, let's say, 850 yards receiving and KLS with 750, well, then there's a pretty good shot Auburn will finally have a quarterback that throws for 3 bills. So that's why it's fun to kind of I just think there needs to be – now, you could have somebody throw for only 2,500 yards, and what we're talking about, it's still 1, 2, 3, 4. It's just less yardage, less production. I just think that he will come in and as an outside threat and as an outside option, and what he did last year, he'll make enough of an impact to be Auburn's number 2. Even if his production slides a little bit, let's say to 650 yards, right? He could still slot in at number 2 with what we've seen with this passing game.
All right, so we both have Cam Coleman leading the way. I have Robert Lewis at 2. You have KLS at 2. We both have each other's number 2 receivers farther down on our list. Where are they? We discuss next, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. I tell you what, I spent some time, Darrell, on the Game Time app all yesterday with the NFL schedule dropping. I want to go see my Patriots host the Houston Texans. So I've been looking at Game Time over and over and over again, just trying to get a feel of where we want to sit when we go watch the Pats in Gillette Stadium. You used Game Time recently to buy some tickets. Is that right?
To buy some Braves tickets. And one thing I forgot to mention that I want to mention is these lightning deals that Game Time gives you. It's a wonderful feature. We talk about looking at your seat, the view from your seat. When you click on Game Time and it gives you kind of an outline of the stadium and where you could sit, there's these little lightning bolts. Yeah. And people need to look for that. They're lightning deals. They're special prices on tickets in special sections of the ballpark. And that's where I bought my Braves Mets tickets and saved money on what would normally have been an area of the park that would have cost me a lot more money. I got a lightning deal, booked it right then, and it was beautiful. And it's right there. It shows you the specials. You don't have to ask like a waiter, right? What are the specials? Right. Garçon, what are the specials?
Yeah, and it's like if you go a section over, it's like $50 more.
Yes,
so it's like the same. It's like the same
area.
Yeah.
And it could be 2 together or 4 together, and that's how they pair the specials. It's a really nice feature to kind of save time.
Yep. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Darrell, the next guy for me in the pecking order after Coleman and Lewis is Rivaldo Fairweather, because there's a lot of questions about Auburn's receiving core. I mean, you can ask a question about all of them. Can Cam Coleman really be him as a freshman? Can Robert Lewis adjust from, this higher level of football? Can KLS transfer after not being, here in the spring? But Rivaldo Fairweather, there's really not many questions with him. I mean, really the limitation from a production standpoint is his position as he plays tight end. You just don't see many tight ends in college football get to 1,000 yards. So to me, Rivaldo Fairweather is number 3. And if somebody wanted to put him at 2, I would not argue with it at all.
Yeah, some solid points. A couple. Number one, the fact that he is a returning commodity that you can count on and was Auburn's go-to guy, so much to the point that they put him out wide sometimes last year.
Yeah.
I have him number 3 as well, and it's because he is like I said, the proven commodity. And just because you hear the term receiving yards doesn't necessarily mean wide receiver. There are offenses that are successful across college football. Look what Iowa has done with the tight end position. They put 3 one year in the league, and they were like the top 4. Brock Bowers, first-round draft pick, could have gotten to 1,000 yards. Don't have his stats in front of me, but I think he's a guy that had he not got hurt, very feasible could have got to 1,000 yards. So I think Fairweather is going to be very productive. His catch radius is good. So, yeah, does he get targeted as much as the receivers? Probably not. So. But I think what he does do and what he does catch is going to be very, very productive. I love that pick. I think he is going to eat in this offense. And again, he is something that you can count on. You can really, he's solid, and he's a good safety net to have. And I think Peyton Thorne throughout the year last year kind of developed that rapport with him that he's my go-to guy. Now they don't have to put so much pressure on him and maybe necessarily play him out of position.
Right. I think the addition of KLS probably impacts Rivaldo Fairweather the most, just because there was probably a scenario where if they didn't get the production out of, that other outside wide receiver, if nobody stepped up or if Perry wasn't quite ready day 1 or week 1, maybe they scoot out Rivaldo Fairweather. But now with KLS, probably more of a proven commodity, to use your terms that you just said, he's going to be an okay outside wide receiver at worst. He's going to be okay. We both think he'll be better than that. So it probably takes a lot of targets away from Rivaldo. Is that 5 targets? Probably not. It's probably a little bit more. It's probably about 1 a game. So, 12, 15 targets over the course of the season with the addition of KLS. But to me, I think Rivaldo's, like you said, I think he's going to get his. I think he's going to eat. I think there's going to be a lot of stuff drawn up for him. And Darrell, if they can get the running game going, which we all expect them to, play action to the tight end. It's a masterpiece as old as time.
Let me tell you why I think in the red zone this year he's even going to be even better and more efficient. Is I think that anybody that played Auburn felt like you could take away the outside and it was never a threat. The boundaries, even inside the 10-yard line. Auburn tried to throw that fade, and it was successful sometimes to Fairweather.
The Charlie 5 fade.
The Charlie 5 fade. Charlie 5's ears perked up as he's driving down the road and heard that. If you've got KLS and Perry Thompson and Cam Coleman on the outside, and you have a legitimate threat to catch balls on the outside inside the 15, what is that going to do in the middle of the field, in the slot area, in the seam inside the 15 with Fairweather and perhaps Robert Lewis? I think if your attention goes outside and safety's eyes start to drift outside, and Fairweather's the perfect big body to catch inside, up the seam, inside the 15-yard line. So I hope it plays out that way. I envision that, but I think having that threat changes even your slot and your seam passing game.
Yeah. My number 4 guy is KLS for some of the reasons I mentioned earlier. It's not that I don't think he'll be productive. I think him missing spring is a big deal. And I think the eventual surge that we will see from Perry Thompson this year is going to impact them. And it could be something where it wouldn't shock me if KLS was on pace to get 600 receiving yards over the course of the season. And then his targets go down a little bit because either Cam Coleman's getting more comfortable or because Perry Thompson is more involved in the game plan, or, I think there's a host of other reasons, but I think those are the main 2. So I think KLS will be very effective, but I've got him as Auburn's 4th receiver in terms of yardage in 2024.
Yeah, and that's exactly why what you just said, why I have Lewis at 4 and not 2.
Flipped.
We got those flipped for a lot. I think we both agree that both are going to be key components to the Auburn passing game.
Yeah.
They're both wonderful additions. They're both going to have an impact. I just think we disagree on how much of or where they're slotted in. So for Lewis, I think it just goes back to what I said before. It's not about him necessarily or what his limitations are. I think he's great, and I think he's going to be very special. It's what maybe KLS was promised from a way of targets and what Cam Coleman's going to do. And when we'll talk about this later, what possibly the freshmen that come on campus, which I leave off a list just because it's an unknown factor. So I love, I think Robert Lewis is 4, and for the reasons we mentioned earlier in the show.
Yeah. So we both have running backs at 5, but they're different. They're different backs. We make our cases next, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel's America's #1 sportsbook. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home that big win of your own. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's free money, Darrell. It's free money, and we all love free money.
Free money. Yep.
Be sure to head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon. And look, if you listen to us talk about this, Darrell, you and I have talked about this before. The line for Auburn's wins over and over and over again, 7.5. If you've listened to us lately, you're probably wanting to take the over. And I'm not going to push back against that at all. So if that's something that you're interested in, be sure to head over to our friends at FanDuel.com/LockedOnAuburn to make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, it's America's #1 sportsbook. So my number 5 receiver is a running back. Your number 5 receiver is a running back. They're just different. I've got Jarquez Hunter. I had him at 4 on my list that I made a few months ago. Yeah, I had him at 4 a few months ago. Slid him down one spot because of KLS, essentially, Robert Lewis. But you don't have Hunter. You have a different running back at 5.
I have Jeremiah Cobb. Since he's come onto this Auburn team and since I watched him in high school, he is a very good receiver. He's a kid. Not to say that Hunter isn't, and Hunter's been used. But I remember watching Cobb come in special circumstances last year. Special downs, came in some passing downs where they do that little jet sweep, but they toss it to him.
Right.
I saw some swing. I just think that they are going to implement him more into the passing game. Like maybe, again, just a guess, just an opinion, that maybe Hunter comes off the field in obvious passing situations and Cobb comes on the field and they utilize Cobb more. They need to. He's a special talent that I think Auburn probably wants to get on the field more, to give him more touches, to keep him happy. And I think the way to do that is to not necessarily take carries away from Jarquez Hunter, but get him on the field in 2nd and 3rd down in passing situations and let him catch some passes out of the backfield. There was a play last year, I don't remember which game it was. It was a huge catch reception from Cobb in a game that got called back on a holding penalty. I think my TV didn't survive that when I threw something at it. But there was something but it was a really big play in a game. And again, I can't remember, but it was like a sneak peek to me that next year,
that's what's coming.
When they don't call holding or when they don't hold, that's going to be a sneak peek. So that's why I have him 5.
So whenever folks make these type of predictions about Cobb, the reason I'm hesitant, it has nothing to do with him and nothing to do with his talent. It's more about what is the path to him getting more of a market share of the touches or the receptions. Like, what does that actually look like? Because we're all kind of assuming he's going to hop over to Damari Austin as far as market share goes. And if you have him as the 5th receiver, then you have him hopping to Damari Austin as far as production goes, right? That's not a crazy thing. I don't want to assume, but do you agree with that?
Yeah.
So my thing is, like, what is that path? Like, what does that logistically look like on the field? Because if he's getting enough touches to be Auburn's 5th receiver in 2024, I mean, he's got to be taking a ton of snaps. And I'm all for it. I'm all for more Jeremiah Cobb. I don't think he's going to have enough opportunity. I want him to. I think that'd be better for Auburn. But you got Jarquez Hunter coming back, who could have probably been an NFL player, a day 3 pick or something like that. And then you got Damari Austin, who's been really loyal to you and a big part of what you've done of recruiting when he was, in high school and kind of helped build that class. He was a better recruiter than the coaches that were here at the time. So to me, I just don't. I have a hard time seeing like logistically how it could happen. Ability, it's totally there. I'm with you. I just don't see logistically how it could happen.
I want to clarify this because logistically this matters. So that's a great point to bring up.
Okay, great.
Just because he gets more touches or more snaps, I don't necessarily think he jumps Damari Alston in the way of carries. So what I'm saying is I think Damari Alston still gets second on the team in actual carries and rushing yards. But Cobb maybe gets more touches than he got last year in the way of jet sweeps, catching passes out of the backfield. That's what I mean. I still think Damari is number 2 on the team in rushing, but I think Cobb gets more situational touches than he did last year, and it's going to be enough to slide him into the 5 slot, if that helps logistically.
Sure. I'm getting a little bit of Devin Barrett flashbacks. It's like, oh, he's in the game. We're going to throw him a swing pass.
Oh my gosh, you just Devin Barretted me on a Friday before the weekend.
I mean, what you just described was a little more sophisticated than how Gus Malzahn used Devin Barrett, but I did get flashbacks of that. It's like, oh, he's the running back we're going to throw to, and when he's in, we're only going to throw it to him.
And then they moved him to receiver. Yeah, I mean, but that's what I'm saying. I look at the end of the day. Do I think Jeremiah Cobb gets more carries than he did last year? Yes.
Sure.
Do I think he gets more touches than he did last year? Yes, but I still think Alston gets more carries and has more rushing yards. I just think Cobb gets more, and it's going to be enough to make a difference on the stat sheet.
Total touches in regards to rushing attempts and catches.
But where I think his biggest increase is going to be.
Yeah. Does Cobb have more of those than Damari? Total touches.
Wow. I think it's going to be similar. I think when you look at the ratio, Alston will be heavier on the carries, less on the receptions and touches, and Cobb will be heavier on the touches from a receiving standpoint than on the carries. And I think at the end of the day, they'll be close.
So here's where I'm going to push back against what you're saying with him at 5 a little bit. Is if that's the case, if it's even total with Damari, and he's 5th in Auburn receiving yards, nobody else stepped up. If that's the case, Caleb Burton never turned out. I'm going through. Perry doesn't turn it on over the last half of the season. Sam Jackson, who I kind of think is going to do a lot of stuff you're describing with Cobb right now. It's like he's not used as much. So if that's the case, and he's even with as far as touches with Damari, do you see my concern there?
I do, and I think so. This is wonderful. I mean, you're assuming. I guess we need to clarify when we say lead in receiving. Are we saying receptions or yards?
Yards.
Okay.
Yards. Yeah.
So I'm thinking that even in the touches that Cobb gets, that may be less than you think enough people need to get to be 5th. It's going to be big play and explosive enough to where it'll slide into the 5th. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
The yards per catch, 30 years, down the sideline on the wheel route or whatever.
Yeah.
Give him a little more touches, and he'll make the most out of those opportunities and turn those into big plays, thereby meaning bigger chunks.
I'm all for it. And once again, I think Cobb is perfectly capable. I'm just
and for the record, I do think Thompson steps up and helps in that area as well. So
yeah, I do too. So yeah, let us know your top 5 receiving yard leaders for Auburn in 2024. Give us your guesses in the comments down below. Love the feedback when Darrell and I did a similar show about the top 5 toughest or most important games on Auburn's schedule. A lot of folks gave lists that were similar to both of us. So opinions all over the place. So please continue that trend down below. Darrell, how can people check out everything you've got going on?
Follow me on X, DAP6410. I'm on a couple of shows early in the week on the Auburn Network, radio shows, and then with you on Wednesdays and Fridays. And as we get close to wrapping up basketball and football rosters, I'll have a little bit more written work for Auburn Daily. Yeah, you can read all my written work at auburndaily.com. Please like the video. Please subscribe, and we will see you on Monday. This has been Locked On Auburn.